Colleagues, I see that we're all here, so we'll start our meeting without further ado.
Once again to the meeting number 30 of the Board of Internal Economy. And so let us run through the matters that are before us. So first thing on the agenda is minutes from a previous meeting. All members have had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes. Are there any changes which you would like to make to the minutes? Y a-t-il des modifications que vous aimeriez faire?
Any changes you'd like to make to the minutes from the previous meeting?
I'm seeing some shaking of heads. Is there any dissent that we adopt the minutes as written? Seeing no dissent, carried. Numéro 2, des affaires découlant.
Number 2, business arising from previous meetings.
Thank you, Speaker. There's the one issue that I had sent to you via letter regarding expenses, and I'm hoping that we could perhaps give some direction to the staff here to go back and perhaps make some recommendations on how we can tighten up these loopholes that exist as a result of caucus meetings coinciding at the same time as conventions. So I don't know if we need further discussion on it or if direction needs to be given, but I'm hoping that the board could ask staff to go back and prepare some options for us in terms of how we could proceed on that.
Mr. Scheer.
Yeah, happy to have the administration consider that. Just wanted to point out a couple things. I know Mr. Gerritsen has referred to this as a loophole. I should just point out that the rules around travel for caucus meetings that occur around political conventions was actually agreed upon by all parties back in, I think it was about 2011, 2012, in that era. So I know he's characterizing this as a loophole, but quite the opposite. It wasn't a loophole. It was a conscious decision that the board made to put some rules around caucus meetings and travel to that. And again, all parties agreed to that. So the Liberal Party fully supported the implementation of these rules with the specific intention of putting rules and clarifications around how MPs could travel for the purpose of attending a convention that happened to be held in conjunction with a convention. And if we're talking about travel outside of Ottawa for caucus meetings, we could talk about the September 22nd Liberal Caucus Retreat in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, which cost the taxpayer $354,692, $43,000 on top of that billed for spouses and dependents. $73,566 was the additional amount billed to various government departments, and $428,000 was the total billed to taxpayers for that one retreat. So that's a significant expenditure for outside of Ottawa caucus meetings. September 2023, the Liberal Caucus Retreat in London, Ontario, was cost the taxpayer $231,636, and believe 26 Liberal MPs have yet to declare their expenses for that retreat, so that amount could obviously be higher. There's $16,576 billed for spouses and dependents to attend that one, and $82,915 was an additional amount billed to various government departments. So that one, with the one caveat that there could be more expenses to come in when those Liberal MPs finalize their expenses, that cost $314,552. So that's just on Liberal Summer Caucus retreats. So just to put that in context, that there are regularly caucus meetings for national caucuses outside of Ottawa in the forms of retreats, and that if the Liberals are going to characterize this as a loophole, then clearly those are also loopholes that the administration should consider and come back with options for changing the rules on that as well. And we would hope that the House administration would do that as well when they do their evaluation of this.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Ms. Finlay, just for the record, followed by Mr. Julian, followed by Mr. Gerritsen and Mr. McKinnon.
Thank you. I think you called me. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have the same point that characterizing this as a loophole, I think, is a mischaracterization. It was something that was agreed by all parties some years ago. And I have also no problem with admin looking at it, but I think we need to know what we're looking at and be fair about its characterization. I note that the Liberal cabinet expensed over $1.3 million on just 3 so-called affordability retreats, which resulted in life becoming less affordable for Canadians, in my view. The August 2023 retreat to Charlottetown cost over $485,000 to the taxpayers. The January 2023 retreat in Hamilton cost over $290,000. The September 2022 retreat to Vancouver cost over $471,000. Also, the New Democratic Party held a caucus meeting before their 2023 National Party Convention, $88,699 billed by the smallest recognized party in the House of Commons, and included expenses of $23,259 for 14 staff members to attend. So I think this is something that touches all parties, and that we are happy to take a look at it, but I'm not sure that the House Leader for the Liberals, who speaks for them here at this board, is necessarily going to come here to commit that cabinet retreats only happen in Ottawa, and that somehow this is something that all parties have been fashioning their meetings in this way, but we're happy to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finley. J'ai Monsieur Julien.
Mr. Julian.
I too disagree with the characterization of this being a loophole. This is something that all parties agreed upon for, I think, what is a very legitimate reason. When you have caucus meetings at convention, there is more often than not a direct tie with the discussions that take place in the House of Commons. And I'll give you the notable example of pharmacare, Mr. Chair, that pharmacare discussions at caucus at the NDP convention, that was a caucus meeting providing that link between the work that was done at convention and, of course, the fact that we now have a pharmacare bill before the House of Commons that is going to make a big difference in the lives of people. So the concern that I have, I never object to administration looking into better ways of doing things, but my concern is the reality is at the last Liberal convention, all members of the caucus used the MOB to come to Ottawa. Now, we were also sitting that week, so it's true that part of that MOB was used for the parliamentary work, but they were also here in the National Capital Region able to attend convention. And so it is, I think, a bit disingenuous to say, well, this is different because the MOB was used first to come to Ottawa for parliamentary work and then following that at convention. What Mr. Gerritsen references in his letter is that when a party convention is scheduled outside of the National Capital Region, he's suggesting that should be looked at and should perhaps no longer apply. Now, I have the furthest commute, well, along with Ms. Finley. I think we're exactly probably the same number of kilometers. It's a 5,000 kilometer commute to come here. And I often feel in Ottawa that there is a vast difference between what happens in Ottawa and what happens in my riding of New Westminster Burnaby. To suggest that we only encourage party conventions and caucus meetings that are held in the National Capital Region, I think does a disservice to the vastness of this land. We're the world's largest democracy. We are a extraordinarily diverse country, and to say party conventions, if there are caucus meetings attached to it, should only be held in the National Capital Region, and essentially that the MOB should only apply when those conventions are held the same week as a parliamentary session, I think does a disservice to democracy and the immenseness of our land. So that would be my concern. I never have objection to administration looking at better ways of doing things. But if the result is a recommendation that suggests that party conventions, that the MOB be used, but for party conventions held in the National Capital Region, for caucus meetings held at that same time, I think the result would do a disservice to our democracy, the immenseness of our country, and the diversity that we have. Alors, pour toutes ces raisons-là,
For all the reasons that I just underscored, I didn't really like the way the letter was drafted. And I think that referring to loopholes when all parties agreed on this particular matter was a poor characterization. And it opens us up to a policy where political party conventions would have to take place in the National Capital Region with a parallel caucus meeting taking place. And I don't think that's an advantage for a vast country, the biggest democracy on the planet. So I'd like to hear my colleagues' input on the matter. I'm open to that. I have no objection to the House administration looking at this, but going forward, if there were not able to be caucus meetings attached to conventions outside the National Capital Region, I'd be against that. I think that that would be a pity for our democracy and for our country. Thank you, Mr. Julien.
Thank you, Speaker. And so, for starters, I do want to apologize if my if it appears as though my intent for this is coming from a political angle. It's genuinely not. We received well, Mr. Scheer can laugh about it, but I'm being completely honest. I read the same story that others read, and it created an opportunity to reflect. I know the Canadian Taxpayer Federation is insisting that they're calling it a loophole too, this loophole be closed. So there are lots of people out there that are doing that, and I think that when a story comes out like this, we have an obligation to look to see if there's ways to do things better. I just want to say that I completely agree with Mr. Julien that it is acceptable and should be encouraged to have caucus meetings and cabinet meetings, quite frankly, regardless of who the government is, in different parts of the country. We should not be expecting Canadians to have to come to Ottawa to be able to communicate with caucus and with cabinet. And so when cabinet takes the opportunity to go somewhere, a lot of time they spend time talking to people that are there. And that's to Mr. Julien's point, which I completely agree with. I think that the issue here is that all of the examples that my Conservatives colleagues gave specifically were about caucus and cabinet. And the issue that I'm trying to raise, which was identified in the story, which now other organizations like the Canadian Taxpayer Federation is calling on us to address, is the fact that these caucus meetings coincidentally are coinciding at the same time as conventions. So it's the convention that's going on which creates the concern. I apologize if I offended anybody with my term loophole. I wasn't here in 2011. I certainly wasn't part of an agreement. I understand that at the time the boy met in camera all the time. Every issue was dealt with in camera, so there would be no public record of that. If there was an agreement of something that came to light, maybe Mr. Scheer, who would have been the chair at the time, would have records of that meeting that could show us that that was an agreement that came to at the time. But that still doesn't mean that we shouldn't have cause for reflection on it, and that's what this is really about. And again, I'm not saying it has to be done this way or it has to be done that way. I'm just suggesting that we should have a discussion about it. And if the board collectively, we do things through consensus, determines, no, the way that we currently have it is good, we're content with keeping it that way because it's fine the way that it is, then at least we've done the due diligence of having a conversation that about a very important issue that has been brought to the attention of the Canadian people. The Canadian people should have an opportunity to see how we come to resolve that. So I leave it at that, and I only intended to write the letter. I was hoping that this would take no more than 2 or 3 minutes, that our House administration could look into it if the board feels they want to do that. If not, I won't bring it up again, I promise, and I'll leave it right there. I'm not looking to make a big issue out of this, other than present it, and if the board determines now, no, we don't want the staff to look at it, then I'm just as happy to never talk about the issue again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garretson. Monsieur McKinnon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ajouterai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I won't add much onto what my colleague just said, except to say to all of you that no one is claiming that caucuses or cabinet meetings should not crisscross Canada. It's part and parcel of our job to listen to Canadians, and it's quite legitimate that parliamentarians of all political horizons engage in that process. Nor did we allege that there was misconduct in this regard. We can see plainly that the rules do allow for this kind of activity. What we are saying and what we are asking is that it is reasonable when there is an activity undertaken that's as partisan as a political party convention, that partisan activity be combined with caucus meetings, for the simple reason that it makes arrangements more simplified for members, their spouses and their staff when they do engage in those partisan activities. We did go over this with a fine-tooth comb. The Liberal Party voluntarily abandoned the policy in 2014 when we were in opposition. And it's a practice that we continue to set aside when it comes to partisan activities outside the National Capital Region. So indeed, we are calling on the House administration to review the practice and to come back to us with suggestions and proposals. And let's call it a spade, proposals as to how to address this issue. But I do want to stress the fact that no one is making allegations here or saying implicitly that there was misconduct that occurred. There was no misconduct. No one is calling into question parliamentarians' travel nationwide, whether it be as individuals or as members of a caucus. That in and of itself goes without saying. So I'd encourage colleagues to take a close look at the voluntary practice engaged in by our political party, and perhaps the House administration could follow suit. And in fact, that's what we're proposing today. Ms. de Bellefeuille. And just for your edification, I have 2 other speakers on my speakers list. We have Mr. Scheer and Ms. Finlay. Ms. de Bellefeuille, the floor is yours. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I think that members of the BOI, Mr. Chair, have always been open in calling on the House administration to modernise and upgrade rules and regulations, and we do this in the orderly manner that we're used to here. A problem is flagged, House administration goes over that issue with a fine-tooth comb, consults all the political parties and comes up with a proposal to improve the situation and modernise the policy. So I don't oppose that kind of process taking place. What I don't appreciate, however, is the way that this issue has been flagged to us today. Now, I understand from Mr. McKinnon that he's trying to, in fact, make sure colleagues do follow the rules, but the words that he chose implied that some members of political parties chose those policies in an unreasonable way, and the word that he chose was loophole. Loophole, to me, suggests that a rule that wasn't followed. And unfortunately, in the media as well, and there has been a lot of media coverage of this, that is also the perception. And I think that Mr. Garretson could have been a little more, how should I put it, classy in the way that he flagged this issue. Now, I think that this whole issue has been flagged in a partisan manner, and I really don't like the way it's been flagged before a boy. Now, Mr. Garretson has apologised, and I think that he has understood now that it was not the best way of addressing this issue, but I would stand up against the use of the word loophole. Now, that said, the Bloc Québécois, of course, travels across Quebec, and I imagine that the teams that are going to do these analyses are going to consult us as the practices that we engage in as a political party at all of our caucuses when they travel. We have a tour of critics that meet with everyday Quebecers, businesses, to make contact with them, to listen to their input. And it's not just, as Mr. McKinnon would suggest, a way of saving on travel costs for members, their spouses and staff. So it's quite complicated, and I trust the House administration to do the proper analyses and to come back to us with solutions and proposals that we can debate. Keeping in mind, of course, what Mr. Julian intimated, and that is that we need to make sure that our constituents and voters have access, the proper access to members of parliament. And of course, the service allocation guidebook policies must be followed, but it is worth in improving as well. So 1 year before an election, it's not appropriate to bring before the boy polarising issues that are highly mediatised, that have a partisan flavour to them. I'd just like to issue that warning, Mr. Speaker. As you know, the climate, the ambiance in the House of Commons isn't very pleasant. It isn't in committees either. So I'd like the boy to be able to avoid debating, having to debate issues that can be perceived as partisan issues. Now, if it is, if the House administration has the time and it's one of its priorities, I'd hope that it would engage in that process. And the service allocation guidebook is being updated, specifically the finance section. And I don't know if Mr. Garretson's proposal is a priority item, but I trust and defer to the House administration to do with that proposal as it sees fit, in keeping with the modernisation of the allocation guidebook. I know that there's quite an undertaking that's underway, and they're going to make the right choices. They don't want to jeopardise their own performance objectives either as they engage in that process. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bellefeuille. And the floor is Mr. Shears and then Ms. Finley's. But it strikes me that there's a consensus around the table that the House administration will look at this information, conduct the proper analysis, and come back to us at a later meeting.
Well, thanks very much, and I'll try to keep my remarks brief. Mr. Garretson has brought up the fact that he seemed to want some more clarification around the fact that all parties agreed to this. And I can tell you that it was absolutely agreed to by all parties, and I believe it's minuted in that way as well in the board documents that would have been published after that meeting. There was no objection, there was no dissidence, so that it was minuted as a decision which reflected the unanimous nature of that decision. And it was a very conscious and deliberate decision as well. It wasn't that overall package of rules were being changed or tightened up or updated, and this was just something that was part of a larger package. This was a specific item directly related to the fact that at national conventions, most political parties, it was the common practice to hold a caucus meeting, the same type of caucus meeting that would be held in Ottawa just ahead of a session or just coming out of a parliamentary break. That's normally when conventions are held. We all know what those caucus meetings are like. You get a legislative presentation on the bills ahead. You get shadow ministers updating caucus on various issues. We have policy experts that come in and inform our caucus about everything from economic data to housing data, and to this happens normally. This happens for all parties outside of Ottawa. I already enumerated the hundreds of thousands of dollars that the Liberal Party has spent on caucus retreats outside of Ottawa. If they're only going to look at caucus meetings outside of Ottawa related to conventions, I don't see how this will actually save taxpayers' dollars if they're going to continue to have their caucus meetings separate from conventions. Obviously, they don't have conventions all the time, but they're still going to continue to travel outside of Ottawa for the purpose of those caucus meetings. So if a legitimate caucus meeting is being held, what is the principle that we're looking at here if it's not going to result in a saving to taxpayers' money? I already indicated that we're fine to have House administration look at this and come up with options, but I believe sincerely that if we're doing this with the lens of protecting taxpayers' money, and I want to congratulate Mr. Gerritsen on finally paying attention to something that the Taxpayers Federation has come up with. I hope this is the start of something new, and maybe he'll be a passionate crusader against the carbon tax, which is also something that the Taxpayers Federation has raised the alarm on. And I appreciate his apology. I know we have a representative from the government broadcaster in the media gallery today who has written on this, and I trust that will be reflected in the follow-up article that Mr. Gerritsen has apologized for the misleading nature of his comments around this issue. So I just want to once again repeat, there's significant taxpayers' dollars that's used to hold legitimate caucus meetings outside the National Capital Region for all the reasons that my colleagues have indicated. If the House administration is going to look at changing or updating the rules around this, we believe that at the very least we should look at how we can tighten up rules for spending on caucus retreats outside of Ottawa, and even for conventions that happen in Ottawa. I mean, if the principle is that there should be no caucus meetings affiliated with a convention, then even if that convention is held in Ottawa, if members are traveling back to Ottawa, not for a summer committee meeting or not to get in touch with their Ottawa staff or work on whatever projects that may happen, if they're only coming to Ottawa for a national convention, then that principle should apply to that as well. So just hope the administration looks at those points.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Ms. Finlay with last comment. Oh, a small comment from Mr. Gerritsen, I see, but second to last comment then.
Thank
and then
you,
let's
Mr.
call this
Chair.
to an end and move on to the next issue.
So obviously, I think we do have some consensus of House admin looking at this, but I think it's important that we make some of these comments now, informing that analysis that they're going to do. And although Mr. Gerritsen apologized, I then heard Mr. McKinnon talking about these being combined events. I've never been to a combined caucus and convention event. We have had caucus meetings, which in and of themselves, there's a beginning, middle, and end. They have a purpose. And then I have attended conventions. In the reason we're talking about this today, and I think this is important because I'm supporting what both Mr. Julian and Madame de Belfoy have said. The reason we're here to even discussing this is we have a letter before the BOIE that says a loophole exists as a statement of fact from Mr. Gerritsen. Then it says, this is unacceptable and we believe, which must be speaking for the Liberal Party, the loophole should be closed. But when that caucus meeting is used to justify expenses for attending a party event, Canadians are not being served appropriately, nor are they being told the truth. That is quite an allegation that has been brought here in a very partisan manner before this board. I think it's entirely inappropriate the way it's been characterized. And then for Mr. McKinnon to say, oh, we're not suggesting misconduct. Yes, you are suggesting misconduct in this letter. And then to use the word combined, I just want it to be at least clear from my point of view that when this assessment and analysis is done, all these comments are also taken into account. I also agree with Mr. Julian that it's important that we as parliamentarians reach out in a very large country. We are often plane mates back and forth to British Columbia, so just flying over everyone isn't the same as actually landing and consulting and meeting with constituents in the country, which we all afford ourselves opportunities to do, and these are some of the ways we do it. But there is no combining, to my knowledge, of caucus meetings with conventions. These are separate events. For efficiency, frankly, if no other reason, we have, as understood to be appropriate and no rules, all rules being followed, that sometimes they take place in the same area at a time which is most efficient. So I leave my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finley, for those clarifications. I understand there are 2 remaining short interventions. Colleagues, we've spent a half hour on this. I'm really reluctant for us to spend more. There is a consensus for the administration to go back and to come back at a later time with some proposals. And of course, we'll consult with all House leaders when we come back with those proposals before we get to a meeting. Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Speaker, if all that came of my letter was a focus on one word that I happened to use, then clearly I was not successful in trying to communicate what I was intending to through my letter, which is that it's extremely important for us to, especially when things like this come to light, to attempt in the best, most responsible way to protect taxpayer dollars. And this is not a newfound interest of mine, as Mr. Scheer would mention. I've been on this board for less than 6 months, and this is the second such issue that I brought up. I also brought up the issue about charging people to use charge electric vehicles here, as well as asking staff to look at whether or not we should change our kilometer rate that people are paid mileage when they're driving an electric vehicle. 2 policies which both would have a negative impact on me. So my agenda here is not to make a political issue out of this. It is to find a path to best represent the concerns that exist out in the community today, just like I did with the other issues. That's my intent here. I apologize if my one word seems to have dominated the discussion amongst some of the people at the table.
Monsieur Julien, le dernier mot est à vous. J'espère que ça va.
Mr. Julian, the last word. I hope it'll be a quick word at that.
Respect for Mr. Gerritsen, and always enjoy hearing him in the House of Commons, but I do believe this was a clumsy attempt to try to make a political point that I don't feel was appropriate. Could have been made in a better way. I'm not objecting to one word in his letter. I'm really objecting to what I think kind of misrepresents the entire issue. It's the letter itself that I find somewhat objectionable. Et j'aimerais dire un peu comme Madame de Bellefeuille vient de dire.
And along the same lines as Ms. de Bellefeuille, this is not the proper forum to be partisan. We should be taking off our partisan caps. And of course, we do represent our various political parties, not to mention our particular ridings. But I really don't want us in the upcoming months to, in fact, engage in partisan battles when we're supposed to be non-partisan around this table as members of the BOI. That's my personal opinion. Now, if anyone wishes to raise a particular issue, well, then they should consider doing it in a more elegant manner at upcoming meetings of the BOI. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Julian. Thank you, colleagues, for this discussion. We're now going to move on to item number 3, Constituency Office Telecommunications Service Pilot for Members, to listen to a proposal for a pilot project for members of Parliament. Mr. Benoit Decker, the floor is yours. At the table, please. Mr. Decker, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'm here today to update the Board on the current state of the Constituency Office telephone service and to seek its approval for a 12-month pilot project to assess the viability of new telecommunications solutions for potential national deployment following the next scheduled post-election period.
Current constituency office phone system was implemented in early 1990s as a standardized service that allows members and their staff to make, receive, and manage calls, voicemails, faxes, and allow constituents to reach constituency offices using a toll-free number. As the current service is reaching its end of useful life, several members have experienced significant issues in various constituencies across Canada. And it has become extremely difficult for the House administration to respond effectively to members' needs and offer the level of service expected. Issues have ranged from lack of service availability, delays in provisioning when members need to adjust telephony features or following an office move. To complicate things, legacy telephone hardware is no longer being manufactured and forces our team to seek replacements from the used markets to sustain the service and puts at risk our ability to continue supporting the current offering. As the telecommunication industry has evolved significantly over the last decade, the current constituency telephony service also lacks the feature set that members expect from a business-grade service, which leads to growing dissatisfaction with our current offering. The current market reflects the industry's departure from legacy phone services, which traditionally centered around voice communication through conventional phone system. Modern approaches provide a broader range of communication services beyond just voice, such as video conferencing, messaging, collaboration tools, and app-based soft phones. This modernization relies on voice-over IP technology, using the internet for calls, which cuts traditional phone line costs. Voice-over IP offers operational benefits such as quick deployment and scalability and improves service responsiveness. With voice-over IP-based calling, members and their staff can make calls from any internet-connected device. This streamlines the support they provide to constituents without the need to be physically located in the constituency office to make or receive calls from constituents. En s'appuyant sur les
Drawing on market analyses, feedback from MPs as part of a recent proof of concept exercise carried out in collaboration with 4 MPs representing all recognised political parties, the House Administration has identified key characteristics to define a new service offering based on IP telephony. 1. Remedy the technological obsolescence and functional limitations of the current telephone service. 2. Improve call and voicemail management. 3. Improve visibility of call history to enable better monitoring and management. 4. Harmonise call functions and capacities throughout the parliamentary precinct, constituency offices and off-site workplaces. 5. Allow you to use the device of your choice to make and receive calls such as software phones. 6. Strengthen the link between staff in the constituency office and in the parliamentary precinct. And finally, offer members the opportunity to tailor solutions to their needs and preferences, allowing them to choose the management and provision of the telephone service in their constituency office. Recognising the importance of these essential elements of a modern constituency telephone service, the House Administration is therefore proposing for your approval a pilot project that will involve 30 members representing the political parties proportionately and to assess 2 different areas in Canada.
Telecommunications offering. So this option provides seamless integration and utilization across House devices and services, leveraging the existing and familiar capabilities of Microsoft Teams. Our prime pilot candidates for this options are members that value the familiarity of the current telephony service on the parliamentary precinct and value the integration potential between Hill and constituency telephony and collaboration platform. Option 2, MP managed telephony. This option prioritizes a decentralized model for telephony services, providing an independent business-grade calling system within the constituency office. Members will have the opportunity to select a local provider of their choice that aligns with recommended specifications set by the House Administration, similar to the way we provision our current constituency internet offering. Our prime pilot candidates for these options are members that value regional choice and are not necessarily seeking telephony integration with the parliamentary precinct office. Both options will be fully supported for the duration of the pilot by our technical teams and protected by the IT infrastructure already in place in constituency office. To effectively evaluate the merits of both options across multiple regions in Canada, we are seeking equal representation of 15 and 15 members for each option for the duration of the 12-month pilot, in addition to the 4 existing members that were part of the proof of concept phase. Veuillez noter que nous ne demandons pas de fonds supplémentaires.
Please note that we're not requesting additional funding today. We're proposing the reallocation of existing central telecommunications funds to implement this pilot project. Technical staff from the administration of the House of Commons will also be reallocated to manage, support and operate the pilot project. At the end of the pilot project, the results will be presented to the board and a recommendation will then be made based on feedback from MPs on the 2 service options tested. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns that you may have. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Dicker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Decker. Now, if members have questions, I'm looking forward to hearing them.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Mr. Julien, thank you very much for the recommendations. I'm one of the members. I'm a member who has a system that works very poorly. But my main misgiving is if we were to engage in a pilot project that lasts 1 year, the current deterioration of the service will continue. So is there a way to shorten the length of the pilot project? Because if there are solutions to be offered to members, surely they should be rolled out as quickly as possible. We get thousands of phone calls per month, and the fact that the telephone system works poorly means that my constituents aren't as well served as they should actually be. Sometimes calls drop, sometimes there are too many persons calling at the same time and the system gets overloaded. We have volunteers that work with my team, and unfortunately there are many files that we're trying to address on behalf of our constituents, and yet we don't have a system that works properly.
Having a working phone system would make a big difference, and I want to make sure that my bosses, 120,000 people in Westminster and Burnaby, never have problems with our phone system, which is increasingly the problem. So is there a way of shortening this time frame so that we can provide the service that my bosses deserve?
Merci, Monsieur Dicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Julian, this is a valid concern, and it's a concern that we've been dealing with for many months now as we're navigating bridge solutions right now currently in place to provide service and offer a minimum level of service expected right now. So we can definitely look at the options of shortening the pilot if you want. These are all options. We need enough time to evaluate the different options. And also, should the House prefer a centrally managed system, we would need enough time to put in place supply arrangement at the national level. These types of scenarios come to play also in our ability to execute and scale beyond 30 members' office. So there's some considerations in there in shortening that.
Supplementary?
Doing the evaluation can be shortened. Right, I do understand that there's some next steps, but the longer we have a pilot project, the longer it takes to actually put in place solutions. And I'm sure my colleagues would agree. I mean, service to our constituents, our bosses, is the most important part of the work that we do. And so having the best possible ability to meet to get in touch with the members of Parliament through a phone system that is functioning perfectly has to be a priority. So if my colleagues agree, if we could amend that to cut the pilot project in half in terms of the evaluation period of 6 months, that means solutions will be in place quicker.
So before Mr. Dicker responds, and I know he will do so substantively, perhaps this is a situation where we'd want to make sure in the case of Mr. Julian, for you or for other members who you are aware of who are having some difficulties, we can certainly have take it away from this table and have a more individualized response to try to help members get through on their, making sure that they're having telephony service that is not causing problems for your 120 bosses or for 120,000 bosses, as each one of us face that same situation. Alors, je pense que on a une opportunité.
So I think that we have an opportunity here, in fact, and I'm saying this to all of my boy colleagues. If you are aware of any colleague who's experiencing problems with their telephony system, well, please do let us know, and we'll make arrangements to assist them and come up with solutions in the short term to address their issues. Now, it's very important for this pilot project, for the reasons Mr. Dicker flagged, and I'm sure he'll elaborate on those, that there be enough runway, i.e. that when the pilot project assessment period ends, that those changes can be put in place. That is what takes more time, because we have to coordinate with various telecommunications companies across Canada and ensure that they guarantee that they are able to perform adequately. Mr. Dicker, in response to your question, Mr. Julian.
Anytime there's a significant issue within constituency telephone office, we haven't stopped. We've worked on gap solutions to ensure the continuity of those offices. It might not be the ideal scenario, but we are working on finding solutions, temporary measures, while this new offering is being evaluated. So just to reassure you on that front. Some of the considerations that need a bit of time to evaluate are, ensuring that, again, standing offers are in place, ensuring the portability of phone numbers. As you know, this is one of the issues in ensuring consistency in ensuring that constituents can reach you if the office move or if there's a change following an election, these types of scenarios. So there's some constraints that we want to make sure that we're evaluating as part of this. Bilingualism, telephony in Canada is a regional market, so there might be areas that were well served and some that are underserved. So we want to make sure that we're providing the same type of service regardless of where you are located in Canada. So there's some constraints at this, but if there's consensus in moving that pilot to 6 months instead of 12 months, we're happy to change and adjust accordingly.
J'ai Madame de Bellefeuille.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first I'd like to thank you. We were part of the pilot project in a technology that you previously tested, and now I've had that experience. Now, in order to get a true appreciation of these options and get the proper feedback and input, we need to give you enough time. Now, I understand what Mr. Julian's saying, but if we rush the assessment period and we don't choose the right technology, the proper tool to move forward with, and of course each and every province has its different ways of doing things, its own telephone and internet providers, and so I'm a little bit on the fence when it comes to Mr. Julian's suggestion. Were you to shorten the pilot project, perhaps the input that you receive won't be as rich and helpful at the end of the day. So perhaps we could set in our sights a 6-month time frame, and that could be the subject of consensus. But at the tail end of that 6 months, well, we could envisage extending the pilot project due to a dearth of sufficient input and feedback. that could be one way of going about things. We're talking about a major pilot project. We're talking about over 138 offices. Some ridings have more than one office, and all their telephone systems will be being analysed. And Mr. Julian said telephones are our primary tool for our teams to engage with our constituents. So it's my opinion that we need to take the time needed. So that's just a caveat, if Mr. Julian would agree, that perhaps you can look into shortening the time frame, but if you feel at the end of that 6-month period that the findings and results don't tell us the full picture, well then, given that we want these tools and systems to work over the long haul, perhaps we can come back and extend the period. And it's a big undertaking what you're doing. I'm not sure if everyone around the table understands the breadth and the scope of this undertaking. And I was part of a previous pilot project. As I said, I'd like to congratulate your team. Everyone who calls into my office, my constituents, that organises meetings, and everyone who's called me from your office has been polite, courteous, and their feedback to my team is that they appreciate this kind of collaboration, because a pilot project, of course, means additional work, not only for you, but for our teams, because you're relying on our feedback to build something that's worthwhile for the future. So I'd like you to give a shout out on my behalf to your team. This is rigorous work that you're undertaking, and I want them to take the time they need to test these systems and properly. And of course, I'm flexible, as I said, on the time frame of the pilot project. Let's have it as short as possible, but with the understanding that it can be extended out. Thank you, Mr. Bellefeuille, for your flexibility and for your feedback. I was also one of the sampled constituency officers, and that's been ongoing for a number of years, in fact. So you're entirely correct when you say their team is highly professional and very attentive to our concerns. And that was the case well before I became Speaker of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. First of all, I want to thank you and your team. This is a very complex matter, and we're talking about many offices and many users, so I think we all appreciate the efforts you're making. I don't think anyone really realizes how bad a problem this is unless they're one of the people where it's not functioning, and my condolences to you, Mr. Julian, if you are, because as whip I've had several members come to me and their frustration is extremely high. And when you're testing and doing a pilot project, of course, that's exactly what it should be doing, is trying to see where things don't work. I have for instance here from our MP for Red Deer Lacombe, where his staff says, I have an issue when a second call comes in, it cuts my mic off if I'm already talking to someone. Well, you're in the middle of trying to help a constituent with a very difficult problem, and they can no longer hear you, and you're trying to figure that out. So I guess the communication piece, if there's any priorities within the priorities, that just the simple ability to be able to know that you have a secure communication, that staff have that secure communication when speaking to someone, has to be highlighted. I also think a year sounds very long to me. It seems to me 6 months would be available, but I also agree that that's something that maybe if you target the 6 months and come back and say, I need a little more time because we're finding this did work or that didn't work, or we fixed this, but we haven't fixed that. However it works, we want to get to a point where we have secure communication systems. We understand you're working hard on it. But for those who are inadequately serviced, this is not just a huge concern, it's a huge impediment to the service we're called upon to do for literally millions of Canadians. So I encourage you in your work. I like the idea of targeting more of a 6-month time frame for the pilot project, and then come back and say we need a little more time if that's what you need, and see where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Finley. Mr. Dicker, des mots à la fin?
Mr. Declare, closing remarks?
So we will go ahead and we will come back. We will target a shorter timeline, but understanding that we'll come back if we require more time to make sure that we do the appropriate job for all members in preserving members' rights and privileges and serving their people. Colleagues, we're going to take a short break while we move to in camera.